This is my leader.
There you go.
And I'm ambitious for him.
Yeah, good on you. Thanks, Gomo.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not.
Did he knock back the crystal? I don't think so.
So we have a very clear plan for jobs and growth.
Welcome back to another episode of Jobs and Growth. I'm your host, Lockie. I'm joined with my co-host and Vice President of Jobs and Growth, George Arcangel.
Director. We released an org chart.
And today we're joined with Kai Bowie. Kai, how are you?
Oh, I'm very well, Lockie, and very pleased to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you, mate. Tell us a bit about yourself and explain that to the audience.
Yeah, sure. Currently, I'm finishing off my degree at Uni Melb.
What are you studying?
Commerce.
Commerce, yeah.
I'm focusing finance management. I've sold my soul to be in consulting, which I'm very excited about.
Big Four?
No comment.
What do you have against the Big Four?
I have nothing against the Big Four. Moving on.
So you're a supporter of the Big Four then?
Can you not trick me so early? Can we at least get past the introduction before I'm tongue twisted? I think the main reason I'm on here, though, is that I'm the president of the Melbourne University Liberal Club, and it happens to be its centenary year, which is quite exciting.
And tell us a little bit about the Melbourne University Liberal Club.
So Melbourne University Liberal Club, MULC, is the oldest liberal conservative club in Australia. It predates the Liberal Party by 20 years and may well survive past it. We'll see. We'll see how we go in this next election. MULC focuses mainly on providing a place for students at Uni Melb to discuss different ideas and to have a debate and to actually engage in the exchange of ideas that I think we all believe university should be about, but in practice is quite missing, especially at the University of Melbourne. And so it sort of provides a space where you can debate freely and generally the people there tend towards a more liberal ideology.
So you're the president of the Melbourne University Liberal Club. Our previous guest, Patrick, president of the YLs, tell us the difference between the Liberal clubs and the Young Liberals as a whole.
Well, first of all, MULC is the best. It's supreme. It's better. It's not affiliated with the party. The YLs come within the apparatus of the Liberal Party and serve a very different function. They serve to support essentially the policy and campaigning of the Liberal Party. MULC serves to be a place of, I think, of growth and of social connections at a university, and that's a very different role, and one that I think is probably, more important and more impactful on our society.
Why do you, going back on that point, there's only been 2 MULC presidents this century that have gone on to become YL presidents. Why do you think that is not such a one-for-one turnover, given the Melbourne University Liberal Club is the oldest and the biggest political club in Australia? Political club on Melbourne Uni, I believe, and the oldest conservative/liberal club in Australia.
Look, I've really only been around for 2.5 years, so I can't speculate too much on why or why not people have gone to the YLs after MULC, but certainly there's always been a bit of tension, I think, between the party and MULC, and perhaps that's a bit of arrogance on both sides. In fact, I'm sure it is a bit of arrogance on both sides. But they serve very different missions, and so generally we've seen people who love the club are not too enticed by the YLs, but of course there are exceptions, and Patrick is a great exception to that, and has done quite well.
Now let's rewind a bit. Let's go back to a young Kai wearing bow ties.
Yeah, thanks.
What got you into politics in the first place?
Yeah, I grew up watching, the news with my parents, and I remember my earliest political memories probably Julia Gillard, and that was just sort of watching her get up and speak. I think for me the light bulb moment was certainly in reading. I quite enjoyed. I've read Thatcher. I came across Thatcher's biography, both of them, and greatly enjoyed them. But I didn't really have a true passion for politics until I got to university. And at O Week, I had no intention of joining the Liberal Club, but I saw the stall, and it was in fact Patrick who signed me up, and I got engaged since then. I think I've always been interested in political ideals, but I wasn't really a political person until I came to uni.
So you were school captain at your high school.
Yes.
president of the biggest political club, the biggest university in Australia.
Those two things aren't equal. One is much better.
Tell us, what were the steps along the way that really got you to where you've become today?
Oh, geez, you need to lie me down on a couch and give me a pillow to hold on my stomach if I'm going to go back this far. I think, we moved around a lot as a family when I was young. I went to about 8 different primary schools. And I think when you move around so much, you're sort of forced to learn to adapt, deal with people, and make the most of a situation given you might have limited time there. And so I think that's helped a lot. It's just about being open. Have you ever seen that Jim Carrey film, Yes Man?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good film.
That's the people I like to have around me. Yes, man.
Yes. George, you worry me. That's also not the point of that movie, but at all. But anyway, I think there's a big truth to that movie. Outside of that, Jim Carrey is a great actor, and I will die on that hill. But certainly, just being willing to say yes to these things. At school, school captain, really it came about because I said yes to so many extracurriculars that they were compelled to put me on there. It's not due to any innate talent of mine, just perhaps being a bit more open than some others.
So you're the president of the MULC. You're a Thatcherite.
Yes.
Outside of Thatcher, where did you really learn to grow and come into your own when it comes to your views of politics and the greater world?
Well, so I would say the biggest influence so far has been Hayek. I won't get too boring, but certainly, beginning with The Road to Serfdom, which I carry around with me probably an unhealthy amount. But his other works, assorted essays, whatnot, and then to a lesser extent, Friedman. I think these people provide a really solid philosophical grounding for what I believe in, which is classical liberalism. And then from that, you get sort of attached to political personalities. I don't agree with everything that Thatcher did. I think she aligned pretty closely with what I believe in. But, eventually, if you stay involved in politics long enough, and I've had some time as a staffer, I've had lots of time on, the hustings for the Liberal Party, then you learn that sort of dimension of politics, a very practical dimension that adds a bit of extra spice to the political theories.
So you mentioned you're a staffer.
Was a staffer.
What did that job look like for you?
Well, it started off answering a lot of emails. You deal with such a range of people, and then that evolved into policy work, and I did some stuff on the Commonwealth Games that were going to come to Victoria, and did some policy on that, and along with some infrastructure things, which was part of the portfolio at the time. And I lasted about just over a year there.
And you've made the shift to the private sector. You're in GovRel, I believe.
Sort of. It's a mix of GovRel. It's a mix of a finance role. It's also a mix of philanthropy, but it's definitely not public work. Yeah.
And then how did you think your experience in the public sector as a staffer helped you make that shift over? What type of stuff do you look back on at your time as a staffer and you're like, yep, that really helps me in my job today?
Well, I'll skip over, there's the basic communication skills and blah, 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 all very important. I think as a staffer, especially when you're young, and I was 18 when I started, it's great to see how the sausage is made from a legislative point of view. And I think it actually, it's a lot less intimidating. Like most things, it's a lot less intimidating once you've sort of seen past the curtain and found the Wizard of Oz. And so after that, I was a lot more confident with dealing with government and sort of understanding legislation, because it's not really there's no secret sauce. It's quite simple how it's done. And I think that was quite empowering to see that as an individual.
Now we're just going to circle back to you as being MULC president. What duties does that carry? What are you doing that other people wouldn't see or wouldn't know that is completely relied on you as the president?
Well, if they saw my bank account, they would realise that the cost of beer really has reached unsustainable levels. I think my focus, and I'm in a bit of a unique situation because it's the 100th year of the club, and that obviously brings with it some unique tasks. I've been focusing on engaging with previous members of the club and sort of engaging with as many former presidents and life members and other club sort of exemplars who can come help us make this a really fantastic year. And most of that, I would say, goes under the radar. because it's just one-on-one meetings with people like Robert Clark, the former Attorney General, or David Kemp, the man for Goldstein back in the day, and even Michael O'Brien, who was the party leader, of course, and we'll have an exciting announcement there soon, I hope. But yeah, so that's been a big part of it. But also, it's like anything, the club's only worth the members that are in it. And so just catching up with members and keeping them engaged and trying to promote the exec and the committee and give them some space to grow. That's all. It's not very public, but it's all very important, I would say.
Now, you mentioned some very big names in that alumni list, some honourables, some lifelong parliamentarians.
Yeah.
When you're meeting with them, do you ever get a sense of, I'm a 20-year-old guy, and is it intimidating? Do you get any imposter syndrome?
It used to be, definitely. But, I think that's one of the great things about MULC is they look back on it so fondly that they're actually excited to meet with people who have the same verve that they did for the club back in the day. So it's quite a very friendly environment, and perhaps someone with slightly less or slightly healthier levels of self-confidence than I have, and I'm unhealthy in that it's probably gone a little bit too far in the extreme, would perhaps feel some imposter syndrome, and maybe rightly so. But I think, we're all humans, we're all here, and why can't we, just because you've been a minister, why can't we have a conversation and have fun and share a beer? It's Australia.
Now tell us, how's it like navigating a uni campus when anyone right of centre, even anyone in the centre is, it's a bit taboo?
Well, if you went through my search history, you'd see Kevlar vest come up a lot. I'm waiting for a sale.
I think they're illegal.
Are they illegal? That's a plot from the left wing literati at UniMel, trying to keep me vulnerable. It can be intense because it is a really hostile place, and we actually had at the club. I try to bring in a few guest speakers every couple of weeks, and we had Professor Timothy Lynch come in, who is a professor of American politics at University of Melbourne, one of the very few openly centre-right individuals there. And even he was talking that as a staff member, it's a hostile environment, and he would be cut off, for expressing certain views. And I think as a student, it's even worse because, as one of 25,000 undergraduate students, I think that's roughly right, you're not really worth anything to the uni as a student. You don't really care, especially the Bachelor of Commerce. It's a total degree factory. And so there's no institutional defence for your right to freedom of speech. I'm not even, especially for here, I'm not even that far right. Classical liberal, which gets me some derision. So I wouldn't exactly call it a radical viewpoint. And yet, yes, it is. It can be a very hostile place, and even in the classroom, it'd be hostile.
And how do you navigate that? A, as a student, and B, as the president of the biggest centre-right club on campus?
Well, as a student, I generally keep my head down on these things. I'm generally not political in class or with my university friends, just out of convenience, I suppose. But as a president of MULC, and when I'm acting in that capacity, then you have to face it head on. The club's been around for 100 years. We have a very proud history, and there's no excuse for cowardice. I've decided to be involved with the club. I accepted the job of president, so that's just part of the part and package with the job.
And what have you done as president that separates you from your predecessors?
Oh, well, I don't think I've done anything exceptional that separates me. Perhaps just I think I've probably engaged the executive a bit more, relied on them a bit more, which is probably a reflection on my lack of administrative ability compared to my predecessors. But I think that has coincidentally had a good impact because I would say the exec's been pretty engaged, especially compared to previous years, and we've had some nice social functions, and I think it's a really good group of people. But that's, once again, probably because I needed them as opposed to in previous years they were able to do it all themselves, which is quite miraculous.
And tell us, how do you go about recruiting new members in such a hostile territory?
Well, at O Week, we were out and proud. We had our beautiful banners, we had our shirts, you could not miss us, and we just take the good with the bad, We had lots of people come up and heckle us, but you deal with it. And I think what's so good to see is when you do put yourself out there and you get, 99 individuals coming up throwing torrents of abuse, you get that 1 out of 100 who comes in and says, "I'm so glad you guys are here. This is you're speaking, you're speaking my language," and they come up and they join, and it makes it all worth it. So you just got to put yourself out there and take the good with the bad.
So we talked about the hostility that naturally, I suppose, exists between the Young Liberals and the Melbourne University Liberal Club.
I wouldn't say hostility, but
There's some tension there.
yeah, true.
Would you say that extends to the Melbourne University Liberal Club and any of the other Liberal clubs, historically or even in the present?
It's the Melbourne Uni Liberal Club is unique in that it in Victoria at least, in that it has had a reasonably continued history of high level individuals being part of it and high level engagement with politics. And so you can sort of look back and say, well, yeah, there has been on the whole MULC, sort of a little bit of tension between MULC and the YLs. There isn't the same sort of data for the other clubs because their influence, that's what I'm looking for, has not been as consistent as MULC, and that's due to a range of factors. And so if you look at a club like Monash, for example, at the moment I would say they're quite partial to the YLs, and that's fine. I get along with Oliver very well. But to say that Monash on the whole has been close to the YLs is tougher to say because they've had years of sort of varying fortunes, as we all have, but I think MULC's been probably the most consistent out of most clubs. So it's hard to comment whether it's a MULC thing or across all of the university clubs, to be frank.
What about battles with the Labor Club?
So University of Melbourne has, I've lost track, 4 or 5 different Labor aligned clubs based on factions that exist within the Labor Party.
Just quickly, bit of a sidetrack. What's your favourite Labor faction?
Honestly, I like TWU only because TWU, at least the union itself, is
What's
actually
TWU?
Transport Workers
Oh,
Union.
do they have their own faction?
Yes.
Wow.
They've actually been somewhat effectual. Not that I agree with what they've been doing, but I just read the Chairman's Lounge by Joe Aston. We were very fortunate to meet him, and it was quite amazing to see what TWU was able to do eventually. Not that I'm generally against that sort of thing, but anyway, credit where credit's due, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm a socialist left man.
Doesn't surprise me, Georges. You seem like a Jacinta Allen sort of.
Well, they're just on top. I like to back the winner, Dan Andrews, Elbow.
Yeah, I like it. Jim Chalmers next.
Anyway, you've got the four Labor clubs at Melbourne Uni.
That was 4-ish. Yeah.
Yep.
Look, we don't have much to do with them outside of student union elections. Student union elections are their own beast.
Yeah.
To be frank, I'd love to have more to do with them. I am so keen to have a public forum debate.
Do you want to call them out now on the Jobs and Growth podcast?
Yes, I would like to call them out. I have said to them, you can always
guarantee they're listening.
You can pick to the one Labor person accidentally listening to this podcast. We have said you can pick the place, you can pick the time, you can pick the topic. I do not care. You can put me in a cage with Labor-aligned lions, whatever. We just want to have a public debate, and they dither. They go, no, not now. And it never happens. So
Now tell us, we've mentioned the 4.5 different Labor parties, Labor clubs at Melbourne Uni. How do you avoid factionalism and keep it just being one Liberal club?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, to have factions is sort of it implies that there are any sort of significant level of membership. I would say there aren't very significant levels of centre-right people on the campus of the University of Melbourne. So I would kind of be impressed if we could have 4 different functioning Liberal clubs, to be honest with you. But in terms of the club, the club has not been perfect with being unified. We've had very public spills in the past. That's part of it. I think for me, when you empower the exec and when you play it pretty even-handed, I sort of try to keep my personal politics reasonably out of it, then you remove some of the reason for people to want to start a different club. We have such a range of views in that club that it's and they're all reasonably accepted to, within reason. So there's not that need for people to splinter off. But time will tell, I very much doubt that in the next 100 years there won't be any spills in the club, but that's politics.
Well, I think disagreement is a good sign of, democracy working well. Because you see the Labor, people not being allowed to disagree with each other. It's almost a cult. So I think the fact that Liberals are allowed to disagree on policy and all these different things is a good thing.
I think we need more disagreement in the Liberal Party. I mean,
we've got a lot.
Well, perhaps a bit more sort of serious.
I reckon healthy disagreement,
That's the term. But you know what? My views on the Liberal Party are worth less than this bottle of water. So I'll spare you those thoughts.
So we obviously know all right-wing movements are prone to really the extremes on the centre, where, it can seem to outsiders they don't stand for anything.
Am I being called out here?
No, not at all. And then obviously, extremes, more dangerous extremes, obviously, to the further right. How do you keep the club in a reputational, in a good reputational light by really avoiding either of those? So, and particularly to the latter one.
Well, look, the former I'm not concerned about. If it's if people are being too soft, it's like, well, it's not ideal, but that's not catastrophic. As you said, that's fine. In terms of how we deal with the far right issue, and this is a serious issue. I mean, we are the only legitimate centre right club on campus, and so if you do have far right wing views, we're sort of the only place that you would think to go. However, we are the Liberal club ultimately, and whilst we remain the broadest of churches, there are still four walls, and there is still a limit to what can go on inside. And I would say, and Mr. Hayek, if he were around, would hopefully agree with me on this point. Once you get to a certain point, either so far left or so far right, you very much become anti-liberal at that point. And if you're a Nazi or a communist, I don't care if that's left or right, that's definitely not liberal. And then those views are definitely not welcome. I think, we can remain very broad, but have some boundaries.
Socialism allowed?
Well, I don't think we have any socialist members. And obviously, we are totally against the idea of centralised economic planning. Socialist is a bit trivial, we sort of throw it around. But yes, we've had people come in with these very serious views, and we try to. But I will say this: I think we're actually a bit of a cure to some of these insane views, and in a way that people might not think. Every Monday we have a Monday meeting, and it's a debate. And generally, I'll pick sometimes it's funny, but usually it's a controversial current political topic, right? And I try to make it so there's disagreement, have a bit of fun. What I've found in my 2.5 years at MULC is that when you get someone who has extreme views, the best thing you can possibly do is actually give them a platform where they have to defend those views in public. When you let this person stay in their echo chamber, like sometimes it's literally an echo chamber, like they're in their room watching the, whatever reels are leading them to that
Andrew
view.
Tate.
Correct, they never challenge. Nothing is more challenging than
Luke Belmar.
Luke Belmar.
Nothing is more, I think, sort of awakening than standing in front of a group of people and actually having to talk through what you believe in. Because if there are fallacies, you hear them immediately, or it's called out by the audience.
Yeah.
And so I think, although I get very nervous whenever someone comes in and says something that I'm going, oh God, okay, here we go. I try to go, okay, let's get them to a Monday meeting. Let's debate something relevant. And more often than not, they actually moderate on their views. And I think that's very much goes against the grain of how the establishment wishes to deal with these views. And I think is a very unique and beneficial attribute of MULC.
Well, look, as the great Justice Louis Brandeis of the American Supreme Court said, sunlight is the best
No talking about American
disinfectant.
politics.
I'm not talking about American politics. I'm just saying where this person who I'm quoting comes from.
Oh, yeah, all right.
It's not a discussion on contemporary US
Just
politics.
making sure you're not breaking any rules of the podcast.
I'm not, don't worry. Just don't start singing again. How do you think we can take this model and scale it so this, could work on a wider scale and obviously decrease the amount of extremism? I mean, Victoria is obviously the heart of Nazism in Australia. How could that model be a wide-scale approach to potentially drive out extremism?
It's difficult. I mean, ultimately, the answer always lies in education. And I would say a little bit more emphasis on real debates at the secondary and tertiary level and encouraging students who have different opinions to come out. And I'll give you a really practical example. It's very easy to get overgeneralized. At the University of Melbourne, they have a compulsory subject for all commerce students called sustainable commerce. And it's a disaster of a subject. Moreover, not only is the content a disaster, it's taught as if it's the gospel truth of the world. It is taught as you would teach a chemistry 101. And the students are brought in and they're sort of, given these very interesting sort of pro-planning views of the world. And there is no scope for disagreement. I would say you can still teach that subject, but imagine if in a lecture and a tutorial, they went around and said, who disagrees with what we've just said? Come up and back yourself, and dedicated a bit of time to that. That's practical, it's small scale, but I think if we did it across education, that would help. Now, can I give any more insight than that? Not really. If I knew the answer, I would have monetized it and retired. I don't. But certainly the encouragement to disagree and the I think the celebration of the courage it takes to take a point of view, even if it ends up being wrong, that needs to be amplified. And I think that's best done in the education sector.
Interesting stuff. I think we'll segue now into
Talk a bit of policy.
Now,
you're known for being a very free market. No, what would you say? Yeah, what do you call it?
Yeah, I would say free market, classical liberal.
Yeah,
Hayek, Thatcherite, whatever, that sort of thing.
Would you go as far as extreme liberal?
What does that mean? What is an extreme liberal?
Complete free markets?
No, I'm not a libertarian.
Okay.
No way.
So where do you draw that line?
Stuart Gibson.
Welcome, Stuart Gibson, to Jobs and Growth featuring Kai Bowie. Thanks for calling in. How are you?
How are you, Lockie?
Oh, hi, Stuart.
Oh, hey, Kai. How are you going?
I'm good.
Stuart, why have you decided to call in?
Oh, I'd really like to get Kai's take on a few things. Kai, how's it going so far?
It's fantastic. I've got these earphones in and I get to hear my own voice amplified. It's a dream. I've got to get some of these for full-time use.
Now, let's make a quick segue because we have kind of a tale of two different ideologies here. Stuart, you're famously a very big Yimby. Kai, on the other hand, is a renowned NIMBY.
I'm very interested where my Yimby accreditation has come from.
Yeah, so am I, actually.
Are you not?
Context dependent, but go on.
Now, Stuart, we want you to still man the case for Yimbyism and then go up against Kai and his NIMBYism.
And Kai, how do you think we address the drop in supply in this country?
Well, I'm not sure that I would be categorised as a NIMBY, but I would broadly reduce. We need to, frankly, build up our building productivity and release the planning. I think the idea to centralise, as much as I don't like centralised government, I think centralising planning powers to the state
100%.
is actually a good idea. Because
look, I agree with your premise, but I think it's somewhat ill-founded. Look, at the end of the day, the biggest block we have to building houses, and especially the Victorian Labor government's plan to build, the figure eludes me, but quite a few hundred thousands of houses, is not planning permission or anything like that. It's actually getting the builders in to be able to do it. I mean, we've got a tradies shortage at the moment.
Yeah, but that's
at the moment,
okay,
and
but that's
we do not have enough builders to do it.
So, yeah, the problem
So
there
that's
is...
your first problem. The other problem is this ludicrous idea of having the suburban rail loop as some sort of
I agree.
concept to be able to build up housing.
Right, we'll take a pause on that second point and let's just let Kai respond to the first one on the central planning unit.
Yes, well, yes, obviously you can only build a house as fast as you can get carpenters there to do it. I would say, first of all, that you said there that, the state is building houses. Well, that's, that entire notion is ludicrous. The government should not be in the business of building houses.
I agree. I just think it's a good example of telling you that there aren't enough actual skilled labourers to be able to do this. I would say that we need
to cut back some of these silly capital works to release the tradies. In terms of getting more tradies, I think there's a huge incentive to become a tradie. I kind of regret that I didn't.
So what essential works would you cut?
Well, apprentices get paid dirt, but then once you're through that, if you can set up your own shop, if you
Yeah,
get on the
but
suburban
back to your
railway,
point, Mr. Bowie. What state capital works would you scrap to be able to free up more
suburban rail loop,
tradies to be
suburban
able to
rail
build
loop,
them?
immediately.
Yeah.
Suburban rail loop would be gone immediately.
See, I get your point, but the kinds of tradies that are working on the suburban rail loop at the moment are not the same tradies that would be building a house.
Yes and no.
Well, maybe they should be if we because if there's no suburban rail loop, there's less power to the CFMEU.
Well, that's true, but it's a bit of the fact is, Stuart, right? We are in a mess. So the solution, we can't go back and say, oh well, if we didn't have the suburban rail, it doesn't work. We're in a mess. If you're asking how we move forward, I say, well, you've got to start scrapping these projects. You've got to decrease the onerous nature of the planning, and to be, as someone who is involved in the commercial real estate area through my work. This is one of the most burdensome tax jurisdictions anywhere for commercial real estate, for residential, commercial, any sort of real estate development. And so I think getting the government out of the way, to be a bit cliche, but Margaret Thatcher on you, is exactly what we need to do. And the problem of builders, well, I believe in the market, and I believe that if we make it profitable to build houses, then businesses will pay enough money to attract the amount of builders they need to build as many houses as they possibly can to maximise their profit. And that's the beauty of the market.
So do you think we should have more skilled workers immigrate to Australia? Is that the sort of enticement you're alluding towards?
Look, immigration's a separate issue. I'm certainly, I think you have to be pro-immigration to a large degree, because otherwise this country would be, as Lee Kuan Yew put it, the white trash of Asia. It really would be, honestly. It's pretty bad. How we choose between those skills, yes, is important. But I think there is enough. I think the market will figure it out ultimately if we just get rid of some of these government barriers. I mean, if you're a construction company and you've got the choice between being on the suburban rail loop or building thousands of houses, well, I promise you, the one that's paying more is
workers on the suburban rail loop at the moment are not the same builders that will build a house, for example.
I'm sure there'd be some pretty significant crossover, though.
They're currently drilling holes. I don't think drilling holes is very relevant to building a house.
But being a carpenter is probably one of the main ones. Electricians, there'll be a lot of electricians.
A lot of sparkies.
Yeah, carpenters is
plumbers.
Pretty acquirable skill.
Ultimately, Stuart, though, if there was an easy solution to this problem, probably would have been done. So, I'm not proclaiming.
I wouldn't put it past this Labor government. But back to the suburban rail loop, do you think it is well founded that this government seeks to build medium to high density housing? High density.
We're going to cut that point off there. We're not this isn't PAYAC. You don't need to be aggressive towards Kai.
I'm not being aggressive.
This is a free flowing discussion, and let's keep the discussion
this is very relevant.
more ideological. Let's not target one party or the other.
This is ideological. Do you think we should be building houses in already medium density and making them high density housing, or should we seek to build low density housing in the regions where it is effectively a lot cheaper and easier to build?
A bit of both. That's my opinion.
I mean, it seems to me a question for a professional urban planner. I've played city skylines.
Same.
So that's
I think that qualifies you as a professional now.
The parking congestion in all of my cities was terrible. I would, if I was one of my little NPCs, I probably would have shot me.
I was pretty good with the traffic management.
Really? And the garbage as well. I never figured out the garbage mechanic. I think it's because of the traffic, like the garbage trucks. But nevertheless, I digress. Stuart, I really have very little idea on the most efficient way to plan, our housing and the density. What I can say is that whatever we're doing right now is not working. And my absolute dream would be they actually got an independent commission, Productivity Commission, please. Danielle Wood, she's amazing. Get in there, say, this is how you should do it, and then they rubber stamp it and take the power from the councils. That would be my dream. But nevertheless, I can't offer much insight on that topic. Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks for joining us, Stuart. Take care.
All right.
He's great.
He's a character.
All right, let's get back to it.
So tell us, where do you draw that line between libertarianism and liberalism that you find yourself in?
Yeah, well, ultimately it comes down to a case-by-case basis. You got to make the regulation. But from a philosophical point of view, I think the libertarian ideology is flawed in this. It pretends that there's some idea of absolute freedom, right? It pretends that there's that the government and law is innately restrictive. I actually disagree with that, despite being a liberal. To give a very extreme example, but extreme examples have their utility, the freedom to walk down the street and shoot someone is mutually exclusive with the freedom to walk down the street and not be shot. And so, the former requires legislation, it requires a police force, which therefore requires taxation, so on and so forth.
But would you not say libertarians believe in negative freedoms?
And
it's, negative freedoms that guide their ideology? It's not that you have the right to walk and shoot someone, it's you have the right to not. So you have the right to not be harmed, to not be interfered, to not be shot.
Yes, but in reality, these rights, rights need to be protected. Rights need to be, they need to be to a point legislated, and certainly, in terms of violent rights, they need to be provided for by a protective force, and that doesn't work in a libertarian ideology. If you take it to the extreme, I think it's very self-evident that some level of government is required, and that the restriction of some freedoms and being taxed has a greater social good. And so it's about finding that balance. That's the difference between my viewpoint and the libertarians, is the balance that I see errs more, leads to a slightly larger government than what they would see. In terms of, looking at the left, the biggest difference out of anything is my belief that there should be very limited central planning.
Do you reckon we're kind of seeing, with all these big businesses becoming monopolies, kind of centralised power in that sense?
Well, give me an example.
Like Woolworths and Coles.
I would disagree that they're a monopoly.
Really?
Yes, I would.
What's their market share? Do you know, Lucky, off the top of your head?
I think it's in the 70s.
70s.
I presume you're alluding to like divestiture powers and breaking them up and what sort of effect that has on the market. The fact is, markets, the Australian market is quite unique in that we've got a very large space, we've got a sparse population, we grow food and everywhere. You've got to transport it. Essentially what I'm trying to say is the specific case of Coles and Woolworths, it's my analysis that, first of all, their profit margins aren't that extraordinary. It's not like they're, I think a telltale sign of a monopoly is that they are making extreme profit. More than that, I think it's highly competitive between the two. And I think, the problem arises when the competition fades away. Just, you may disagree, but accept for a moment the notion that Australia can only support, there's a physical restriction on Australia only supporting 2.5 major supermarkets. So that's a universal truth, sort of Audi and then IGA and whatever. If you take that to be true, right, then so long as the 2.5 or 3 or 4 supermarkets that are there, as long as they actually have to compete with each other and can't collude, then there is no problem. I would say that whilst I can't prove and don't have the intelligence to mathematically solve how many supermarkets we efficiently should have, I can say there is certainly no evidence that they are colluding, and there's no evidence that they're making extraordinary profits.
Yeah. And what do you think about the KFC and Macca's duopoly?
Can I comment on that? I think that it's not a duopoly because clearly anyone with a reasonable sense of sanity chooses Eljana over the other two.
There's rest in peace, Carl's Jr., by the way. Tragic loss of the Australian commercial landscape.
Really? Were they in Australia?
They're gone. They were. Yeah. It was flew too close to the sun.
Yeah. No.
Icarus.
Yeah. Five Guys deserves to close.
At least they give free peanuts, that's something.
Yeah, that's
a sign of monopoly. How can they afford to give away all those peanuts, There's a collusion between them and Nobby's nuts.
Yeah. Well, definitely in my area in Kew that we only have KFC and Macca's.
I'm sorry if you're lost.
I've been lobbying for a
Nando's.
I
think you should talk to your local member about that.
Yeah, no, we definitely need a Nando's in Kew.
Oh, I do like Nando's. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Chicken pita with garlic sauce.
Oh, yeah, the pita
I always get the hottest sauce.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm a big guy.
I don't do spice.
That's like, if I was going to flex about one thing, it's that I can take the hottest Nando sauce.
All right, I think we shift to some more quick-fire questions.
Okay, I'm ready.
The questions are quick-fire, but the answers don't have to be.
Okay, good.
So I think the obvious one in anyone's mind is that the coalition won 17% of young people in the previous federal election. What do they do to win young people?
I'm not sure if you saw, things have been getting desperate in journalism. The Age actually reached out to me and asked me this very question. But I was very honoured to give them my 2 cents. I think I look back as to why I support the coalition. And in this campaign, I'm going to give a bit of context and I'll give you a concise answer. In this campaign, there was nothing that I was energised about in terms of the policies that were presented by the party. And I thought, okay, well, what policies would energise me? What would energise me is if Peter Dutton had come out and said, I've just spoken to the Productivity Commission. I've just spoken to, expert X, Y, and Z. And they've said that we need to reform tax in this way to spread the burden away from your generation. We need to, bring in this much gas to protect your electricity prices and keep it sustainable. And maybe some policies on tertiary education, sort of unmuddling up that. What I didn't see was a vision, and I think this idea that we need to pander to young people specifically with, youth-focused policies is wrong. I think people just need, young people we're ambitious. We want to see an Australia where we can be at least as successful as our parents, if not more. We want to be able to buy a house. A political party that comes out gives an intelligent sounding vision for that and clearly communicates that it's to the benefit of young people, I think that will do very well. I don't think the Liberal Party needs to fundamentally change. I just think they need to switch their focus. We're never going to win young people with culture war issues. And, every moment, no matter what you think, no matter how right-wing you are, and, no matter what you don't like welcome to countries or whatever, every minute that we spend talking about, acknowledgement of countries or welcome to countries, that's time not spent enunciating a vision that's attractive to, the vast centre of Australia. And I think it's poor strategy, and it's in large part what led to our demise. I think our actual views on that are irrelevant because it's not a big issue for most Australians.
Do you reckon there was a bit of a culture wars kind of being played by Peter Dutton?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I think even the stuff on Woolworths and Coles, I mean, you obviously you believe in the Australia Day, but also the divestiture stuff. You may believe in divestiture, but the argument was not presented from an economically rational. He didn't come out here and point to statistics on his board and go, "This is why I support divestiture." He came out and he said, we're being hard done by, we're being price gouged. Let's attack these guys. Didn't sell Australia Day merch. Let's get them. And I think people are on the whole against that.
But I mean, we've seen right-wing governments all across Europe and the United States claim victory on very cultural-focused campaigns.
True.
What do you think separates Australia from the rest of the Western world?
I think a huge part of that, having spent a lot of time in Germany especially, is I would say our multicultural success, which is super unique. You have a lot of these European countries, especially Germany and France and Italy, they don't know how to do multiculturalism nearly as well as we do in this country.
Yep.
And it's such a huge issue when you think, rightly or wrongly, and a lot of it I would say wrongly, there's a lot of propaganda out there, that if you think that your home is being taken away, that you're being invaded, right, then that will dominate how you vote, regardless of anything else. I don't think that exists in Australia.
Do you think that's maybe because Australia doesn't have a culture?
I think we said, I think we have I think our culture is, it's less visible. It's less about, events and what we wear and dances and things like that. And this is obviously
and food,
European, Australian.
Yep.
I think our culture is more about, it's a bit more subtle, the idea of the fair go being fair dinkum, of getting rid of sort of social class divides.
Pretty much everything John Howard embodies.
Well, I'm a pretty big John Howard fan. I was very honoured to get a photo with him, which I showed to absolutely everyone I meet, including on first dates. It always comes out. That has mixed success, but anyway, it's more work choices than GST in terms of success rate. But anyway, that's my view. I think that partly explains what's happening in Europe. It's just a very different mindset for. It's not to say they're all racist, but it's just it's a totally different equation.
Yeah, and I think a lot of their immigrants aren't skilled. They're like refugees.
I wouldn't make sweeping generalisations of that nature, but in Germany,
I think it's reasonable to say post the Syrian refugee crisis
Germany's a great example of just that being done very poorly. And you know what? And in that case, it really did change. It did change Germany. And I read Angela Merkel's book that she released earlier in the year. As I was, like most people,
was it in English?
It was in English. I didn't read it in the Deutsch. But like most people, I think, or at least most commentary that I saw, they were very disappointed that she didn't even reflect, really, honestly, on the effect of that decision to so rapidly.
I don't think I've ever heard a politician reflect on a bad decision, honestly.
I'd say that's not true.
This book that I've got my water bottle on, I mean, Thatcher does a lot of reflection in here, but
Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott is always loudly saying that he got his 2 years in government wrong.
Yeah, wow.
So we've mentioned, so you're on the Liberal Party that need a rebrand, not a rebuild.
Well, I'm going to just very quickly say that internally there needs to be, in terms of, practical party administrative things, I think there needs to be a huge rebuild. I think our pre-selections are a disaster.
What would you do to fix the pre-selection process?
Ultimately, all evil stems from low membership branches. That is the root of all evil in the world. Because when you have we have branches in this party with that are eminently winnable going against this Allen government that have unbelievably low membership numbers, right? Now the question is, how do you boost membership numbers? Well, buddy, that's a big question. I think in the absence of strong branches, I think we need to take a gamble and rely more on admin pre-selections and hope that they make decisions in the interest of the party and not themselves. It's not a perfect solution, but when the branches, when recruitment to branches and increasing proportion is so easy, bad things happen. Yeah. So that's something I would do, is maybe rely more on a centralised pre-selection process and maybe raise the bar for membership before you can do it completely independently. And would you say also maybe lowering the bar to actually run for pre-selection? In what way? Because I think you have to be a member for a year before you can run for pre-selection. Is that true?
That is true, but as we saw with the previous federal election, you can get I forget the term for it, but you can get a waiver essentially. Yeah, you use exemption or something. Yep. Okay. Well, you should probably get rid of that. But the thing is, I think the mistake in terms that some of these pundits make is they focus on policy. I mean, I love policy. I could talk policy till the cows come home. Mm-hmm. But like I said earlier with the MULC, an organisation is to quote Thatcher, she got flamed for saying this, but if you listen to the whole thing, it's actually totally fair. There's no such thing as society. There's no such thing as a Liberal Party. There are members of the Liberal Party and there are groups of members in the Liberal Party. There's no such thing as society. There are individuals and there are families. And it's totally true if you take it in the way that Thatcher actually meant it. The Liberal Party does not exist. If the Liberal Party was replaced totally by communists, it would retain the brand and it would be a communist party. Why do I say that? Any long-term solution means getting good people in there. I don't know how to get good people in there. I really don't. But any pundit who focuses on anything other than that, I think is wrong, personally. That would be my strong opinion on that. Mm-hmm. Tony Abbott or Malcolm Turnbull? That's tough. I do think Turnbull was a better Prime Minister, but I think post
prime ministerial careers. I think Abbott has had much more class than Turnbull.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of either of them. Well, politically we're talking. As persons, I've met Tony. He's actually a very affable guy. So I would happily have dinner with him and a beer. But in terms of the politics, no, I would probably err a little bit more towards Turnbull, but I think I would prefer Abbott as a person.
China, is it a threat or a partner?
The nation and people of China are a partner, but the Chinese Communist Party is the biggest threat of the century.
No good.
No good?
That's disgusting.
Is it?
What have they done?
I'm with Kai on that.
What have they done?
What are they doing? Well, I think it's an ideology that is totally irreconcilable with ours, and I think that if here's the thing, I truly believe that if we had the power to take, if we had a genie came up to us and says you can take over the world, I truly believe that we wouldn't do it. That's maybe I'm wrong, but America had a nuclear, they had nuclear monopoly for 4 years. And they didn't abuse it. I think that if the Chinese Communist Party was given that power, no matter the cost, they would take it. And that's the difference. I think there is a moral backbone, no matter how often we push the limits of it, and we do, and I'm talking about sort of the West in general here, I think there is something there that exists because we respect the individual and we treasure that. And I don't think that exists with the Chinese Communist Party, and I think that is what makes it a threat.
Taylor Swift or Kim Kardashian?
Taylor Swift.
Trump or Elon?
Trump?
Just Melbourne, Melbourne or Sydney?
He hated to say that one.
Depends how much money you've got.
If you had to pick one or the other, tax cut or pay down debt?
Ooh. Right now, I would say, that question assumes that they're mutually exclusive.
No, but if you had to pick one or the other, say you're the treasurer and your budget is either going to have a tax cut or you're paying down debt, what are you doing?
In this situation right now, I think we need to pay down debt. But I would say that often tax cuts can lead to growth in the economy, which will reduce debt. But anyway.
All right, Arthur Lafer here.
How many are you going to get that? I'm not sure. It's funny though.
All right.
This little segment to farm clips to put on the TikToks and the Instagrams.
Okay.
So, I've got a list here of what the AFR said in 2024 were the 10 most powerful people in Australia.
Yeah.
In what year was it?
2024. The list is very outdated not very outdated. There's only a couple who you could say probably could get bumped, or 3 or 4. You got to guess who the people are, and I'll tell you where they are on the list.
Anthony Albanese.
Here's number 1.
Jim Chalmers.
5.
Gina Reinhardt?
No, she's not here.
No.
Penny Wong.
3.
Oh, 3 for 3.
There's some here.
There would be, I reckon they would put some, I reckon they're all going to be Labor people. I reckon there'll be some union people. Sally McManus from the union.
Yes, she's 8.
Yep.
That's a good get. I would never have got that one.
No, I just know how they would have made this. Would there be other ministers in there? Probably.
I'll tell you what, there's a couple of Liberals. That's a bit of a hint.
Well, Dutton would be in there.
Yeah, it was Dutton. But yeah, I'd replace that with Susan Lay now. But yeah, Dutton's there. He's 4.
Dutton's 4. Okay. Who else?
Was Angus on there? Angus Taylor?
No. But there is one other Liberal, and I'll give you a hint. Very strong on the Voice campaign.
Jacinta Nampijinga-Price.
Jacinta Nampijinga-Price, number 10. I know.
Above Gina Reinhardt.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, there's one executive here.
An executive. Oh, it'd have to be Matt Coman, right? CBA?
No, that's what I would have thought. But no, it's the BHP one.
Yeah.
They were probably the most biggest market cap at the time. Mike Henry, number 7.
Yeah, okay.
Who are we missing? Have we got the deputy PM? No, you forgot the deputy PM. Richard Miles.
Good friend of the podcast.
Where's Richard Miles?
He's 6.
Okay.
And number 9 is a Greens politician. He's lost his seat now.
Adam Bant.
Not Adam Bant.
Not Adam Bant.
Max Shanley-Mather.
What? Who? Was someone on crack when they made this list?
Yeah, no. And I saw the
we're missing number 2 as well.
Number 2. Oh, you got to get it. I'm not going to give it to you. You got to get it.
Between Albo and Wong.
They used to make very important decisions on the first Tuesday of every month. I think it changed now.
Oh, Philip Lowe?
No, it was Michelle.
Right, 20, I couldn't remember when he...
Is it still first Tuesday of the month?
Sounds about right, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, no. Michelle Book.
There you go. I can't believe, wow.
I don't
Max
know how
Chandler
Max-
Mather.
Max Chandler.
Max Chandler Mather and Jacinda Price do not belong on that list.
AFR is normally quite even.
I love the
as well.
AFR. It's the best newspaper in the country. Please give me a column.
Or sponsor the podcast.
Sponsor the podcast. Although the freshwater poll was kind of shit, but anyway, apart from that.
It's not letting me.
Then we'll segue on to our audience question. We have one here today. Good friend of the podcast, David Kitchen. Is the Australian Army ready for the challenges of the 2020s?
Oh.
Just give us background, your experience in the Army before you answer
Right, so I have a limited but not zero experience with the Australian Army. I'm a reservist at the moment, doing my officer training. So hopefully this time next year I'll be an LT, which would be good, lieutenant, which would be nice. What we do have the great privilege of receiving is talks from current generals, and I'll stick to, obviously what's public. And does he focus on, when he says the Army, is he focusing on the Army or like the Australian military in general?
I think the Australian military in general.
Okay, that makes it a bit easier.
Yep.
When you talk about, we have to ask, what is the purpose of the Australian Defence Force? I'm going to set the stage here with that. So I would say there is great disagreement on what the purpose of the Australian Defence Force is. Some, and I would say sort of the John Howard view would be that the ADF exists to be an auxiliary to the American war machine. That we exist to work with America, and that is our only role, right?
John Howard would probably disagree with that. But.
Well, I mean, I know he sent us into Timor-Leste, but in terms of like the long-term vision that he had for the military, I don't think he did anything that took it away from being an auxiliary to America. The other view on the other extreme is that Australia should have a self-sufficient defence, that we should be able to have, obviously the only sort of reasonable threat, the only likely threat is China, and then maybe like India in 50 years if they keep going down the post-fascist sort of thing that they're going on right now, I think. Or maybe Indonesia if something goes really wrong. But
you're not a Modi fan?
Not a Modi fan, no. No, I'm not.
Why not?
Well, that's a big question. I think he's an authoritarian, and I think the level of sort of race hatred and cultural hatred that he stirs in India is frightening.
Do you not think him winning last year's Indian election, not in a complete majority, but in a coalition minority government, would that almost not be a case against him being an authoritarian? Because clearly the elections there weren't mishandled, which I think is a
I think
guiding
philosophically he's an authoritarian. I think whether he's actually functioning as a full authoritarian, no, obviously not. But I think
dictator and authoritarian are different, though.
Well, I think I mean from an ideological standpoint,
Yep.
I think he's an authoritarian. I don't think he cares much for democracy. Whatever floats your boat, but we're going to disagree on that. I don't think he really cares. But in terms of the Australian military, so you sort of have to, are we going to be self-sufficient, or are we going to be, the sort of the auxiliary to America? If you're basing, are we ready to deal with the threats of the 21st century? If our role is to be the auxiliary of America, then yes, perfectly fine. We can perform that role. Maybe not as well as we'd like, but, we can do that. If your criteria is, can we defend ourselves against, all possible threats, then no, obviously not. If China came to us and, we were saying, could we, defend our critical infrastructure, and could we pose a sort of a threat to China that would, or a sort of disincentive to attack us? No, I don't think we could. So it's up to the politicians to decide which army or which military they want to develop. But without America, no, we don't have much chance. And I think it's possible for us to have a military that could create enough of a deterrent to prevent, to essentially protect ourselves. But do we have the will to do what needs to be done to achieve that? I don't know.
Do you think this Albanese Labor government would ever have the political will to expand the military in what is traditionally a more centre-right kind of ethos?
Well, Labor won World War II, so well, I think if they thought it was going to win votes, they would do it. I think Albo has ample respect for the military. I don't think he's one of these greenies who think we should, trade our guns for butter.
What about Richard Marles, who's obviously very
he loves
pusillanimous?
it. He loves it. He loves it. So yeah, I think if they thought it was politically expedient to massively expand the military, they probably would.
Do you think given the current debt levels, we're in a position to be able to?
Debt's an interesting thing. You've got to have a close look at, what the makeup of the debt is, when the payments are due, what the interest rates are. But ultimately, I will say this. I think the highest purpose of government, and I think the initial reason why governments were formed, if you want to go all the way back, be a bit anthropological about it, is to defend the citizens. That is the highest purpose. Nothing else is more important than the defence of the citizens. So I would say even the economy, if it has to be, should be sacrificed to protect the country. Ideally,
should it be sacrificed to protect the country in what is seemingly a peacetime?
Well, that's a great question. And there's hilarious. There's Utopia clips. Have you seen Utopia?
I've read the book.
The political satire TV show.
Oh no.
But there's like a great line where the generals are all huddled around and they're like, "So, who is our biggest trade partner? China. Why do we need these submarines to protect our trade routes? Who are we protecting them from? China." So it's there is a point to be made that maybe there isn't a threat, but I'm a bit more pessimistic. I think that there is a threat. But yeah, whether we need to throw the kitchen sink at it in peacetime, I don't know.
What do you reckon the threat is exactly?
I think the most likely threat is a blockade of Taiwan, that America gets involved, we get involved, and then China is able to, through cyber warfare, potentially kinetic warfare, take out our major infrastructure.
How is that any of our business, though, Taiwan?
Well, I think there's two things there. One, I get a bit ideological about this, but I think we have a total responsibility as a free nation to protect other people who want to be free, and that's something I think would be, what was our business in Poland, for example. But I think it was obviously Japan's different, but, why did we join the war 2 years before the Japanese did? And I think that was totally the right thing to do. The second thing, though, is that what sort of precedent does it set? If China can take Taiwan and the West does nothing about it, that's the beginning of the end for the world order, pretty clearly, I think. And currently we've boxed China in. We've got Japan, we've got Taiwan. We're sort of kind of got the Philippines. They're boxed into their part of the Pacific. If we lose one of the links in that chain, then suddenly the dragon's unleashed. Very scary.
Do you think that perspective that we have a moral duty to defend free nations, do you think that's been hurt over the past 2-3 decades over the failed Middle East regime change wars?
Yeah, nothing hurt it more than Iraq. I mean, well, look at this. Let's go back 3.5 decades. 1990, the Desert Storm was fantastic for the ideology that we should intervene because it was successful, right? That was probably the zenith of our global influence, I would say, Western sort of American global influence. Iraq was a disaster because it was the wrong war at the wrong time, at the wrong place, blah blah, whatever, and a terrible occupation. But hypothetically, if Iraq had been successful, then different story. To answer your question, yes, that event has been disastrous for our sort of supposed moral obligation or superiority to engage in these things. But I don't think it's totally gone, and I think I think we would have huge support across the globe to intervene on behalf of Taiwan.
I think Wayne Gretzky once said, "An injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere."
Did he really say that?
No. Wayne Gretzky was, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
I thought it was Michael Scott. All right, as we're slowly beginning to wrap, we'll kind of ask you some questions that we always like to ask people on the podcast. Who do you think was the greatest Liberal leader who never was?
Who never was? Controversial. I have a bit of a soft spot for John Hewson. It's very controversial. There are huge problems.
Can you answer the question of how much would you pay for what is it, a birthday cake with candles on it?
Yeah, here's the thing with John Hewson, right? As a political leader, not very good. But I think fight back, if it was delivered by someone with a bit more pizzazz, would have been fantastic for the country. And most of those things were eventually brought in. So I think if we'd had that sooner and fully implemented GST as it was supposed to be, I think the country would have been a better spot. So do I think he was the greatest of our leaders that weren't to be in terms of leadership? No. But I think in terms of the impact on the country would have had if he'd come in with a clear mandate to put in fight back, I think that would have had a huge impact compared to other
just to
leaders.
clear things up, you do or don't support Climate 200?
No, I'm not a huge fan of Climate 200.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. That's yeah.
Well,
Is that related?
they're a friend of the podcast.
Are they?
Yeah, we have Turnbull
I'd
paraphernalia.
say they're an enemy of the podcast.
Look, I have no issue with Simon Holmes Accord. He
Really?
graduated from Geelong Grammar along with myself and Richard Miles.
He was
I have a
bullied.
soft spot
He was
for him.
bullied by your ilk, Geelong Grammar.
Every school has its ups and downs, its positives and its negatives. He's a proud alumnus.
I don't think he's a proud alumnus.
All right, Kai, what is one big thing that no one's talking about?
I think no one's talking about the fact that as a society, we have moved so far away from liberal ideas across the world that the orthodoxy of both major parties has transformed into centralised planning disaster that is honestly not too dissimilar from the socialism that we saw in Britain after World War II. And I think
could you ascribe that to maybe some of the failures of liberalism, where we saw upward mobility decrease, the rich get richer, and the middle classes and middle and working classes stagnated?
I think it's wrong to blame that on liberalism, and moreover, I think the ideas of I think it's much easier to sell planning, the sort of ideology of planning. It's much easier to sell in the sort of politics than liberalism. And, if you read Hayek, the problems that Britain was facing in 1943, 44 and onwards, it's like reading something written today.
You're not a Keynes fan?
No, not a Keynes fan. Have you ever seen Yes, Prime Minister?
No, I haven't.
It's a great show. And there's, this is not going to be funny, but I'll say it. There's this line. The whole point is that in this episode, bankers are stupid is like the point. And they're talking about economists, and Sir Humphrey is like the smart civil servant, and goes, so what do you think of the economists? And he says, well, I heard of Milton Keynes. He goes, Milton Keynes. He goes, yes, Milton Keynes. That's one, isn't it? Now the joke there is obviously Milton Friedman, Maynard Keynes, but also there's a city in Britain called Milton Keynes.
Oh wow!
Anyway, yeah, it's funny if you watch it. They're all dead though. That's
a
another thing we
shame.
could talk about. It's so sad watching these old shows and everyone's dead.
Have you seen the British House of Cards? That's a good one.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's only 4 hours as well.
Comes strongly recommended by
Is it
many
good?
people. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's better than the original.
Yes, a lot of people would attest to that. Now, I think we kind of go with our very standard closing question. President of the MULC, big career in consulting, but, what is next for Kai Bowie?
Well, I've got to get through my investments exam on Wednesday. So wish me luck, but the bonds aren't going to prize themselves. But yeah, after uni, I'm excited to finish my army training, start my career, which will be good. And then after that, who knows? Probably go to another university and waste money pretending to learn things. Yeah, it'll be good and having fun.
Brilliant. Been a great chat. Thanks for coming on,
Thank
Kai.
you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Adios.